from the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus. This is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. I'm Carissa Cheng with your news and sports updates to 12 o'clock. Municipal elections in BC struggle to pull in voters. Our reporter Kyle Collis has more.
Municipal elections in British Columbia have seen a lack of voter turnout, especially when compared to provincial and federal elections. In 2018, voter turnout was only 41.95% in comparison to 2021's federal election turnout of 75%. With municipal elections coming up, Stuart McGilvray, who has a political science degree from UBC, stresses the importance of municipal elections.
For everyone, in most countries, municipal government is where you live. It's your local community. It's people who are on the ground way more frequently. It's also got responsibilities that are a lot closer to home for many people.
General voting day for municipal elections starts Saturday, October 15th. Kyle Collis, 1680 The Crow.
We're now being joined by our reporter Kyle Collis. Kyle, how many eligible voters did Vancouver have in 2018?
Well, Vancouver actually had the most eligible voters out of any local governments here in BC with just under 450,000. However, the voter turnout was only 39.36% that year.
Is that expected to be different this year?
Well, Vancouver this year has an estimate of 460,000 eligible voters, which is an increase from 2018, and 458,659 are registered to vote. As for voter turnout, we'll just have to wait and see.
Thanks, Kyle. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has commented on Hockey Canada's handling of the sexual assault allegations posed against them. Trudeau says it is clear Hockey Canada executives just don't get the seriousness of the situation facing the organization. Trudeau says it, quote, boggles the mind that past and present board chairs are refusing to replace the entire leadership team at the sports governing body. Sport Minister Pascal St-Onge and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau have both called for executives at Hockey Canada to step down over its handling of alleged sexual assaults. St-Onge says the decision by Hockey Quebec to cut ties with the federal organization shows that there are reforms happening at the provincial level.
It also sends the message to the leaders of the organization that are holding on to their jobs that Hockey Canada doesn't belong to them, it also belongs to their members, and they want change. They want a change of culture, and they want a fight against sexual violence.
The remarks from Trudeau and St-Onge come a day after Hockey Canada's interim board told a House of Commons committee that hockey is being made a scapegoat for the toxic culture that exists everywhere in the society. Tens of thousands of salmon was found dead in a dry creek in Bella Bella. William Hoosty, the conservation manager with Baltsuk Nation, says this is unheard of. The continued dry weather in the province is impacting the coastal wildlife ecosystem. BC is providing the province's newest Crown Corporation $500 million to invest in companies that drive climate action and innovation. NBC aims to start distributing investment funds to businesses by next spring. The Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation says the Strategic Investment Fund company's goal is to support sustainable economic growth. It says NBC will have the mandate to support people, the planet, and profit. Jobs Minister Ravi Kahlon says fostering innovative ideas is crucial to growing the economy. Port Moody police are asking the public for help to find suspects in a tire slashing spree. They are asking for anyone with dashcam footage on View Street and Highview Place to come forward. Constable Sam Zacharias says the police received multiple reports on October 4th from vehicle owners about their tires being slashed. Police say there are 8 known incidents that are believed to be connected. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The risk of cybercrime increases as more of our lives are lived online. Shivani Joshi finds out more.
According to a poll by RBC, many Canadians are worried about the looming threat of cybercrime, yet have done little to protect themselves. RBC's Chief Information Security Officer, Adam Evans, says it is important for Canadians to start taking care of their online security.
And that journey doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. It can be a very simple step. Start taking care of your cyber hygiene, educating yourself, and learning about the things that are out there that can help you manage your security on your journey.
Cyber hygiene consists of creating stronger passwords, setting up two-factor authentication, using a VPN, and managing your social media settings. Shivani Joshi, 1680 The Crow.
A First Nation in northwest Saskatchewan is reissuing a state of emergency. Buffalo River Dean Nation says elders in the community have been assaulted due to a rise in gang violence and illicit drugs. The First Nation leaders are asking the federal government for more support to address this violence. Starting tomorrow, businesses in Canada will be able to pass credit card fees on to their customers. According to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Visa and MasterCard had previously restricted merchants' ability to include fee surcharges. The Federation says 19% of small businesses are considering adding a surcharge on credit card transactions, but other small businesses are afraid of losing customers. If merchants decide to pass on the fees to their customers, they will have to provide a written notice to Visa and MasterCard. This change is a result of a multi-million-dollar class action settlement involving the two companies over interchange or swipe fees. Apple will have to change their iPhone charging ports in Europe starting autumn 2024. The European Union passed the reform yesterday, and new rules will make USB-C connectors the standard across the 27-nation bloc. This reform is the first of its kind in the world and will also apply to laptops starting in 2026. The BFI London Film Festival is returning in full swing tonight. The event is kicking off with a musical action adaptation of Matilda, which is the first time in a decade that a family-friendly film has opened the festival. Festival director Trisha Tuttle called the choice of opening film joyous and that it plays really well to everyone. Now moving on to sports. The Vancouver Canucks keep their preseason rolling tonight with a game in Abbotsford against the Edmonton Oilers. The Canucks look to bounce back tonight after dropping the game against the Oilers on Monday 7-2. Puck drop will be at 7 p.m. from the Abbotsford Centre. The 2024 Paris Olympic Marathon course was announced today, which will be a 10-kilometer race with lots of uphill. The course will run from Paris to Versailles and go past famous landmarks such as the Eiffel Tower. Female marathoners will also get the chance to compete last for the first time in Olympic history, having their race held on the final day. New York Yankees slugger Aaron Judge has officially passed Roger Maris to now hold the American League home run record. Judge hit his 62nd home run in the game against the Texas Rangers last evening. Chuck Severson has more.
Second game of a doubleheader against the Texas Rangers in Arlington.
Here's the 1-1. Swung on. There it goes. Deep left. It is high. It is far. It is gone. Number 62.
On WFAN, Aaron Judge getting his name next to fellow Yankees Maris and Ruth. One word.
Incredible.
Also,
it's a big relief. I think everybody can finally sit down in their seats and watch the ball game.
The ball.
That's a souvenir for a fan.
On the eve of the last day of the season, Chuck Severson, ABC News.
The Yankees close out their regular season against Texas this evening. Canadian tennis player Denis Shapovalov has advanced to the quarterfinals in the Japan Open after a win Wednesday morning. The Canadian, who is seeded 7th, beat American Steve Johnston in straight sets in the third round. Shapovalov will face off against Japanese qualifier Rino Noguchi in the quarterfinals. Canada is competing against Thailand in the 2022 FIVB Women's Volleyball World Champions in Poland. Canada is currently ranked 17th in the FIVB rankings. The teams have been divided into two pools, with Canada in Pool F with the United States, Serbia, Turkey, Thailand, Poland, Germany, and the Dominican Republic. Now moving on to your weather updates. It is currently 20 degrees and partly cloudy. The temperature will reach 21 degrees in the afternoon and will dip to 13 degrees at night. Those were your news updates to 12 o'clock. I'm Carissa Chang for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
It's extremely important for people to stay healthy and to stay active as much as possible.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikka-King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May
says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Siggi-King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Hello, you're listening to Companion Call on 1680 The Crow. I'm your host, Gurpreet Kambo, with my producer, Bonnie Chakawa, in the producer's booth over there. We're talking about neurodivergence in the post-secondary setting. I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder as an adult in university, not at BCIT, somewhere else, but I went back to school to finish a bachelor's degree in my late 20s, after having had a rough time with it when I was younger, multiple goes at post-secondary as an adult. Amanda McKierney is a queer-identifying autistic woman studying at BCIT in environmental public health, and she's also elected as the Vice President, Equity and Sustainability in the BCIT Student Association. And Joanna Angelidis is the Associate Director in the Accessibility Services Department at BCIT. She also previously worked in the public school system. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So I will start with this. So Amanda, you've made autism and neurodivergence, in some of our previous conversations. I understand it's one of the focuses of your role as VP Equity. Why is that?
During my first year of my program, I actually faced quite a lot of barriers to being able to get an education, per se. There was some bullying from some of the students in my classroom. It could have gone to Human Rights Tribunal. I didn't take it there because everybody in the program is a lot younger than me, and quite frankly, these girls, the frontal cortex isn't quite developed yet, and I don't think that they need a permanent blip on their record when they're still technically children. So I worked with the department to try and come up with a better solution, which basically was bringing in somebody who was able to do a lecture on neurodivergence, because when we go out into the workforce as public health officers, we're going to be working with all types of public. That includes neurodivergent people. And so I thought it would be really important for everybody to learn about it early on and know how to deal with different situations. The problem is the department didn't make this lecture mandatory. They were able to file paperwork to get a grant to cover the cost because apparently it was very expensive. But at the end of the day, the 2 instructors that should have been there and the 5 women who should have been there, or 5 girls, didn't show up. So after that, I didn't really want to come to school anymore. And that's not fair to me. I fought really hard to get here. It took me, like you said, in and out of university, it took me 20 years to finish my first degree. I didn't know I was autistic till I was 33. I got diagnosed after my almost 4-year-old daughter was diagnosed. I had been searching for answers for 3 years at this point. And that gave me the last piece of the puzzle to do more research. And when I started reading about it, I was like, oh my God, this is it. And then I started reading more and I was like, why does this sound like me? Now, my struggles when I was a child were a little different than Anna, because it's a spectrum. You talk to one autistic person, you've talked to one autistic person. You don't know, everybody's different. But I started remembering how I was in school and I didn't have friends and I read at recess instead of playing with the kids, and sometimes I asked questions that other people thought were inappropriate. But it was just curiosity on my part. I didn't realize that what I was saying was not nice. Social interactions were completely foreign to me.
Right, right. And Joanna, I want to bring you into the conversation here. So, in our conversation, I understand as an administrator that you've also been an advocate for accessibility and for neurodivergent students. Tell us a little about what brings you to this work.
It's such a good question. I think from the time I started my career as a teacher years ago, I started as a high school teacher, then did elementary and so on. I think there's always a part of me that held a deep belief in the inclusion of everyone and in systems, environments that allow for everyone to be themselves.
The atmosphere is definitely changing. It helps when you have a lot of parents who are realizing as their children are being diagnosed that they are also on the spectrum. And so now you've got parents fighting with their kids, not just for their kids. Because at the end of the day, these children are going to grow up to be adults. People who think differently than 10 neurotypical people at the table, then you're getting new ideas for how to do things and new innovations for how to solve problems or create things that are going to make our jobs easier as humans and things that nobody would ever thought about. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Right. And what do you think, Joanna? Like, is this something in the public school system and in the post-secondary system that there's sort of a greater understanding than there was 20 or 30 years ago?
Absolutely, there is. Definitely in the public school system, there's attention to language, language that isn't used any longer. There's attention and priority on, reviewing our structures and improving them. But we're not done yet, right? There's still more for us collectively to do.
So much more.
Yeah. I read a book recently, and I can't remember the title of it now, but it talks about the history of public education in Canada. It's called A Class of Their Own. So he talks about
the special needs class, right?
Yes, and he focuses on Ontario, but it's across Canada and across the USA.
We had
it's
them
applicable.
in my school when I was in school.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he talks about, this language is just totally unacceptable, but he talks about students who are deficient. I'm pretty sure that's the word he uses in there.
It's better than the other word.
Right, which was also used. And then he talks about how they built this structure. This is so not he needs to talk about it himself because I'm not going to do it justice. But he talks about how the education system was built, I can't remember the exact year, 1910, 1920. It's built. And then within a few short years, there's recognition that it doesn't work for everybody. But instead of restructuring it at that time, there's this creation of this, these are the students that don't fit because there's something wrong with them, and they go over here.
Well, you got
K to 12.
When you think about why education systems and why school was formed in the first place, in particular, the lower levels of school, it was to basically train kids to grow up and be worker bees, right? So when you have kids in there that aren't learning the same as the other ones, they're probably not going to be worker bees. So you want to hide them.
When we look at where we are, they're like a continuum from this place that was super exclusionary and quite frankly discriminatory. We're constantly improving, and it's taking much longer than it should. I'm sure, but we're not there yet. Right?
We're not even close.
Right, exactly. So knowing this here, right, where we came from, I think is super important.
So it's all political, right? I feel like it's not just, that a neurodivergent person has a disability because they function differently, right? It's as I mentioned in the introduction, that it feels like this is kind of a growing movement, right? That the society needs to adjust itself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, we're trying to operate in a world that was not created for how we work.
Right. There's actually a local autism advocacy group called Square Peg Society.
I joined it last week.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
cool.
What does that mean to you, the phrase square peg?
I don't fit in the standard box. I'm totally okay with that. I own my authenticity now. I'm not masking anymore. It's like doing that is exhausting.
What's masking? Tell me about that.
Masking is something that a lot of mostly autistic women do in order to try and fit in. Because, especially for women, when you don't fit in, life is hell. Literally hell. I can tell you that growing up with no friends was not fun. Now that I think back, like, I don't have any really long standing relationships with people. They've just kind of floated into my life and then floated out. Like, people have needed me around briefly, but I don't really need anybody. I'm totally cool with being alone.
Is that something that you learned, or is that something that you was inherently a part of your personality?
It's part of my personality. My ex-husband, we went hiking last year, I think. We still go and do stuff with kids. But he and I took our youngest son out for a hike. And I don't, like, they don't keep up with me. And then he looks at me, he's like, there you go again. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you hang out with people by yourself. He's like, it was always like that. So I'll go out and do things with people, but I'm doing my own thing beside them. And I don't even notice. But sometimes they do.
What's an example of masking?
I don't know how to describe it. Have you seen it, Joanna?
Totally. I think I have. So like you recognize that a certain way of being is the norm and it's what's accepted. And so because you want to be included, because generally we all do, right? We're social beings, then you will hide something about yourself and conduct yourself in a way that fits that norm better, right? So you'll be accepted, I think. Is that
Thank
fair?
you. Yeah. That basically described it pretty well. I'm not really good at that.
And it's a trauma response, isn't it?
It can be for people who have experienced trauma in childhood. But when you're autistic and you haven't experienced trauma, it's still applicable.
Right. Yeah, and my experience of masking was that it was almost like a brute force response to like certain social situations. It's like you only learned this because of making the same mistake like many times again and again. And that doesn't necessarily mean you understood it. It was just like almost a trial and error kind of thing.
Yep.
It's exhausting too.
It is
right?
totally
Yeah,
exhausting.
It's a lot of energy output.
Yeah. And so Joanna, like I understand that you've worked with a lot of like kids and whatnot in the K-12 system, like neurodivergent kids, right? Like does a lot of this resonate with a lot of the kids that you worked with?
Yeah, I would say it does for sure, right? So, being at school and sometimes recognizing that there are things about you that are different, sometimes not recognizing it. And then being in an environment that without certain things in place or certain adjustments can be very challenging, right? It can be exhausting and these are things that students have shared with me, or maybe my observations as an adult, or things that parents have shared. So exhausting, but you might not know why, right? You might not know that it's the social interactions that everybody else seemingly goes through and enjoys, but for you might be challenging or more energy output. It could be noise. It could be the lighting. It could be the playground that is challenging, right? Or high schools where you're going in and out. So all these things that, without certain adjustments could actually unintentionally often serve to, limit someone's ability to function happily, calmly, at the very least, but certainly thriving and succeeding at what we should be achieving.
Right.
To add to what Joanna's saying, like I think back to my my childhood and adolescence and stuff, and not knowing that this was a thing. Girls didn't get diagnosed back then, and diagnosing boys was rare. But for me, thinking back to all of the problems I had, if I had known and had some understanding, I wouldn't have dropped out of school at 16. I wouldn't have had to keep trying to go back to finish high school. Graduated as a mature student. I'm super smart, and I wanted to be a doctor.
What a tough thing to sort of think about, to sort of mourn what you think, like, if I'd known before, you know, like what I could have done, or like who I could have been. Like, I feel like that's a sort of a mourning process that like a lot of neurodivergent folks go through.
When people uncover stuff about themselves that is particularly concerning or shocking, definitely like feel the feelings. They're valid. And yeah, like we got the short end of the stick, but on the other side of that, it's brought me where I am today, and I'm fighting for this stuff now so that my daughters don't have to do it. Because my 12-year-old, she's going to be graduating in 4.5 years. Holy shit. Sorry. But 4.5 years is like, it goes so fast. You blink and they grow up and they're gone. And like, I have 3 adult children. I don't know how that happened. And my 22-year-old is pretty sure she's autistic. But when I took her to get an assessment 2 years ago from a doctor here, who wasn't really good with diagnosing adults, and especially with women, he diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder instead, even though I gave him all this evidence and told him how she was growing up. He was like, nope, I'm not convinced. And I was like, what? Like, are you kidding me right now? And like, when I took Anna to a doctor in New Brunswick right after we moved there, this is like, she got seen by somebody here in BC, and then we moved to New Brunswick and got seen by somebody else there. The guy here said, she has a few red flags, but I don't want to diagnose her. Take her to New Brunswick. I showed him pictures of food she bit into shapes and then lined up on the table in patterns. And she took apart a whole roll of toilet paper and laid rows of squares over every surface of the bathroom. It was like the Twilight Zone. And videos of her meltdowns. And this guy looks at all this stuff that I'm showing him, and he says, well, she's pretty quirky, but she's not autistic. She can't be autistic because she's a girl. This kid was almost 4, and she wasn't going to get any help, because in New Brunswick, once you start school, there's no help for you. So I phoned Dr. Hilary Cartwright's office. She's one of like the biggest names in like autism research and stuff in New Brunswick, in Fredericton. And her receptionist answered, which she never usually did. And I was just hysterical. And she's like, calm down. And I told her what happened. And she's like, I'll call you back in a few minutes. She called me back. They had a 2-year wait list. She's like, can you come in 4 weeks?
Wow.
Because if Anna didn't get an assessment and didn't get a diagnosis and didn't get a little bit of help before she started school, who knows where she would have been. And they knew that because she was older. They made a space for her. And the relief that I got was just so profound.
Where are we moving towards as a society for neurodivergent folks, and what do you think needs to change?
I think, and I'm being a bit repetitive here, but I think it's all of us orienting from a place of authentic inclusion of everyone. I think that's really critical. And then from that will flow, things like our systemic things, right? And our systems and our procedures and all that kind of stuff will flow from that. So once we're oriented in that way, we'll look at, what are the policies that we need to continue to revise? What policies are missing that we need to have in place? If we look at a post-secondary institution as an example, what is it that instructors are doing already that needs to stay, and what is not being done that would need to be done so that we are living out our commitment to being truly inclusive. I also think, and that's part of that commitment to being truly inclusive, is that the stigma, disappears. That we can all feel comfortable just being our authentic selves, right? And the diversity amongst us. And then I think over the years, we'll start to see, as students go through our systems, we'll start to see more and more diversity in the various places that adults contribute to our communities. I know there's brilliant, bright, wonderful people who are not as successful as they could and should be in our high schools, and maybe don't make it to post-secondary, or they get to post-secondary and then they're not as successful as they can and should be. And then when we look at what that means, in terms of who are our doctors, who are our lawyer, or whatever, right? We need diversity there as well. So I think that is we continue to live out year after year after year this journey to being more deeply and authentically inclusive. We'll start to see that starting to have really good impact for us as we have true diversity in all the things that adults do in a society. And I don't know if I made that point really clearly, but I think if we only have a certain kind of brain or a certain kind of way of thinking or being in all these adult roles that we hold, then that doesn't serve us at all. We need that diversity.
Otherwise, we'd be like robots.
Yeah.
Where's the fun in that?
Right.
And I mean, it's all incremental, right? And I mean, I know that's just the way our society works, but I think a lot of people are going to still go through a lot of trauma while that incremental change happens.
Yeah. Totally. Zero tolerance needs to actually be enforced. Sometimes there's bullying that happens and nobody ever acknowledges that it's really an issue. I still know parents who end up switching their kids' schools because the school isn't taking it seriously. Or my daughter, I love her, holy man, she's 12, and she said there's been a couple of times at school in the last 2 years where she's seen kids get picked on. She's the kid that goes in there and interrupts it. The feeling of being left out, even when you don't really care, because I don't really care, but when they make it when those people make it obvious that you're an issue, it's what the hell?
Any last words from either of you? Last thoughts?
I think that these conversations, or conversations like this, I think are critical. I think hearing the stories, and giving ourselves time to reflect on them and look at what that means for us and what do we change about what we're doing and how we're doing it. I think that's important, right? Conversations like this.
Absolutely. And to go one step further, as the VP of Equity and Sustainability, one of my objectives is actually to get cultural safety and trauma-informed care and neurodiversity training to be implemented into the curriculums here at BCIT. And hopefully beyond that. I have my sights set on, actual provincial policy and then national. Because this is ridiculous. We start with education, right? Education changes people. People can't be excluding people that they learn and understand. And I think that that's where we start.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. Well, thank you to the both of you. And I'm really glad that I could bring the both of you together and have you guys meet each other and talk. It's like having a meeting of the minds about neurodivergence in a sense. So I really appreciate you guys having this, having this very candid conversation here. Thank you for joining me. And that was Joanna Angelidis and Amanda McKierney. My name is Gurpreet Kambo, and my producer in the producer booth over there is Bonnie Chakawa. This is Companion Call on 1680 The Crow.
breastfeeding is for most moms really hard, and it is a very intense period.
I had a really challenging and difficult breastfeeding experience.
Just a special connection you have with your baby.
Ultimately, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was harder than giving birth.
You smell him, your breast milk changes, and it makes antibodies to protect you. Come on in. Hi, I'm Tessa, owner of Mama Milk Fairy. Welcome to my studio. This is where I make all my precious jewelry. With Mama Milk Fairy, I make breast milk jewelry and breast milk keepsakes. And I started this business to help moms commemorate their breastfeeding journeys. Because breastfeeding is for most moms really hard, and it is a very intense period, and it's something that we would like to have something from once it's over. It's a special time during a mom's life, a special time during a baby's life. So moms, they send me their breast milk in like, I'll try to cover the name a bit, like in a breast milk storage bag like this, and then they put it in some Ziploc bags because I send it by mail, just prevent leaking. And I then preserve it with my special preserving powder, and then it turns out to something like this. I don't know if you're able to see it. Is it like preserved breast milk? Once I've preserved it, I grind it really fine in the mortar and pestle, and I set it in resin, and epoxy resin. And many moms want to add some color, or they would like to add a little shimmer or whatever. Everything is possible, so whatever they want. Or I add a lock of hair from their baby, or dried umbilical cord. And once that's finished, I set it in either solid gold or sterling silver jewelry setting, in a pendant, or in earrings, or a ring. There you go. So pretty. I've put a lot of things in there. The one that recently that I have been asked only once was a single eyelash from a mother's son from her baby, because he has such a beautiful big eyelashes. So she literally gave me one eyelash to work with, and it turned out really well. I have some pictures of it on my social media. It was just one beautiful black eyelash on there.
How hard was it?
Oh, very hard. It made me very nervous, because usually if they give me locks of hair, I have some more hairs to work with, or I can move it around a little bit. And with this, I only had one. Lucas, can you go with Papa? So the main challenge for me was that our oldest son had trouble latching when he was just born. The first few days went very smooth, very easygoing, and then suddenly I started to have troubles with his latch. Well, I didn't know that at the time, but I started to have cracked nipples and started to bleed, and up till a point that it hurted so much that I couldn't feed him anymore. Another difficult moment when I was breastfeeding was when I went back to work. I had to start pumping because he went to daycare, and at that time I was working full time, and that was a lot of work, and it was really hard. And I don't know, I think that pumping mothers need more respect.
yeah, I was Googling breast milk jewelry, and her name came up, or her website came up.
Oh.
I had a really challenging and difficult breastfeeding experience, and it was just really, really, really hard. But just having something to remind me, of everything that I went through, and I just really wanted some type of keepsake. I mean, I think for me, I know when I opened the jewelry, I still get emotional thinking about it, just because my journey was so challenging and not at all what I had hoped for or anticipated. But I know when I opened the jewelry box, I cried. I just burst into tears, because it just reminded me of how hard I'd worked for something that was so important to me. And, it was the way I wanted to mother. I wanted to breastfeed my child. And it didn't totally work the way I wanted it to, but looking at the jewelry, it just really reminded me of, it was our experience, even if it wasn't the best experience. But it was our journey between me and my son, and it meant a lot to me to be able to even breastfeed him for the short amount of time that I did. The whole journey feels like it's all wrapped up in one piece of jewelry. And then she also gifted me a small little heart to go with it, which was amazing and such a beautiful surprise. It really meant a lot to me that she did that. So, yeah.
Try to hang in it on your own, and there's a lot of help out there. It's more and more common, and people are supporting breastfeeding now. There are lots of doulas, midwives, lactation specialists that can help. There are a lot of support groups, and you're not alone. So a lot of it's very normal that it doesn't go smooth and easy, and that's okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off!
first started playing music with Charlie, specifically punk music. Love punk rock. And then one day we were like, oh, let's go see the Pixies, because they're coming to Vancouver. They're playing with Weezer, another 90s alternative band. Afterwards, Charlie came up to me and was like, dude, like, we should start a band. Like, we should actually try and do music. That'd be so cool. Like, let's do it.
All right. All right, this one's called Slap It Bye, Baby. He said, babe, I want to be in that ass like a parasite. And do you think my touch is what heaven's like? And you know, like they scream when I go for the throat. And you know what it's like to watch blood pour on my nose.
And so we go through that first quarantine, and it was a search for a drummer, because it was me and Zach on guitar. I was doing most of the singing, Charlie was on bass.
I was learning guitar and Lars was learning all kinds of instruments, so we just kind of messed around. And then it kind of got stale after a while because we couldn't really work off each other in that particular arrangement.
And we were just like desperate for someone who would be able to play drums, and then we'd be good to go, right? And so probably the most musical person in our grade at the time was a certain man named Knight O'Connor, who played guitar, played bass, and played the drums.
So, I mean, I knew everybody from high school. I knew Lars, Zach, and Charlie. And I knew that they were playing music together. And I knew that there was a party coming up that Charlie was throwing. So I went to that. And I managed to corner Lars and Charlie. And I was like, hey, you know, I know how to play drums. And I heard that you guys are down a drummer. I can play drums for you if you'd like that.
We started going, and Knight is a pretty rough drummer, and it was fun, but we were like, okay, this is a good place for this band to start. Like, this will work, we just gotta give it time and learn stuff. And we were like, all right, like, let's take a little break, right?
And then we figured it out, because Knight's a way better bassist than he is a drummer. Lars is a way better drummer than he is guitarist. I moved the keyboard because I'm much better at that than bass. And Zach stayed on guitar because he's so good.
And then we like played the best I'd ever played up at that point in any group setting ever. Played some of the most fun music, rough and raw, but exciting and new and fun. And we knew we would never go back to the old instruments. From that point on, we were like stuck in those spots. But I'd say our biggest influence was coming from Pink Floyd. Because we adored Pink Floyd as the typical high school stoners we were. We loved Pink Floyd, and we'd sit there and listen to Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall and dedicate hours to it and stuff. You know, way more important than schoolwork at the time. You know, you gotta get your listens in on some Pink Floyd records, you know. But as to who I would compare us to and who we sound like the most, well, we get a lot of people who say we sound like the Doors.
I've heard from a lot of people that we apparently sound like the Doors in terms of our musical arrangement.
Which is funny because I'm not even that big of a Doors fan. But Charlie's a massive Doors fan, and once again, that's where the Doors got their sound, was through those keys and stuff.
I don't think a lot of people have an answer for Knight's singing. He kind of just sings like Knight, he just shouts. I like it.
As far as genre goes, Lars and I came up with psychedelic funk and punk.
So a lot of bands, whether or not they're a one-hit wonder or whatever, a lot of bands have that song, like the song, their song. It's a song that people say, oh yeah, they sing blank. For Queen, it's probably Bohemian Rhapsody. For Led Zeppelin, you have to say it's Stairway to Heaven. Like Nirvana's It Smells Like Teen Spirit. So if I asked you, what's your song? What's the song for Big Long Baby?
Bugs.
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 Bugs?
But who gives a shit about insects?
I wrote Bugs about drug use and how it kind of affected me and how, there's that blasé attitude. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. Roaches in my lung, roaches in my heart, kickstart. But it's about drugs, and it's got that kind of like evil feeling to it, about how it's super fast paced, and then it's, you're getting hit with it.
Give a shit about insects? Think you care too much? We all who takes care of terraria? Give a shit about insects? Think you care too much?
That was the easiest song we've ever written too, and I think we finished that song in like three band practices. We actually like completed that song with the words, with everything. Yeah, it was by far the easiest song we've ever written, and the most excited I think we've ever been writing a song. It was very fun to write that one, because we were like, fuck, this is cool.
So I remember playing it, and I just sat there for, must have been like half an hour just trying to work it out. And then I got like the verse chorus down, and then I wrote this like slow, heavy part. And I was like, this is great. So I recorded it and I sent it to the band, and they're like, that's fucking awesome. Yeah, I just really channeled how I was feeling into the words and made a singable melody that still kind of felt punky and had that attitude. And then I brought the words into practice, and then we played it together, and it was done. That was, I think, probably one of the first songs that we sat back and were really proud of.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
I'm Chadis Leo here with your 1 p.m. sports update for 1680 The Crow.
The governing body for hockey in Quebec says it has lost confidence in Hockey Canada's ability to manage sex assault allegations involving players. Giuseppe Valiente from the Canadian Press has the story.
Hockey Quebec says it will no longer transfer funds to Hockey Canada because the national body has admitted to drawing on membership fees to pay for sexual abuse claims involving players. The provincial federation says its board of directors adopted a motion on Tuesday saying it does not believe Hockey Canada's current structure can change hockey culture. Hockey Quebec says it has decided to keep the portion of registration fees it normally transfers to Hockey Canada, which amounts to $3 per sign-up. Giuseppe Valiente, The Canadian Press, Montreal.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also commented on the controversy, saying it's no surprise that provincial organizations are questioning whether or not they want to continue supporting an organization that doesn't understand how serious the situation is. In hockey news, the Vancouver Canucks will take home ice tonight, but at the Abbotsford Centre at 7 p.m. against the Edmonton Oilers. The Canucks are hoping to establish a win against the Oilers after losing to them on Monday 7-2. Over to baseball, where the Toronto Blue Jays are wrapping up their final preseason game against the Baltimore Orioles. Coming up this Friday, the playoff season starts with the Jays facing their first foe, the Seattle Mariners, in a wild-card matchup. It is only the second time in 6 seasons that the Jays have made the playoffs. Coming off a historic record-breaking game yesterday, Aaron Judge and the New York Yankees are gearing up for another game tonight. Here's the moment where Judge hit his way into MLB history books with his 62nd home run of the season. Judge and the Yankees are heading to the pitch today at 1:05 p.m., marking their final game of the regular season against the Texas Rangers. Canadian tennis star Denis Shapovalov served up 11 aces to beat American Steve Johnson 6-3 and 7-6 at the Japan Open this morning. The 7th-seeded Shapovalov, who lost in the tournament semifinals 4 years ago, will take on Japanese qualifier Ryo Noguchi for a place in the quarterfinals. The Japan Open Tennis Championships in Tokyo run until October 9th. Over to NFL, where the Pittsburgh rookie quarterback Kenny Pickett will make his first career start when the Steelers visit Buffalo on Sunday. Tom Merriam from the Associated Press has the story.
The Pittsburgh Steelers have named Kenny Pickett as their starting quarterback on Sunday and presumably well beyond. The Steelers' first-round pick out of the University of Pittsburgh, making him a local favorite, made his NFL debut at the start of the second half in Sunday's loss to the Jets, running for 2 touchdowns but also throwing 3 interceptions. Pickett replaces Mitch Trubisky, who started the first 4 games after being signed as a free agent in the offseason. The 1-3 Steelers play at Buffalo on Sunday. I'm Tom Merriam.
Ukrainian Soccer Federation President Andriy Pavlyuko says hosting World Cup matches in 2030 would be the dream of people who survived the horrors of the war after his country launched a joint bid with Spain and Portugal. The leaders of the 3 soccer federations joined together at a UEFA headquarters to present a campaign they hope will connect people beyond the world of sports. Pavelko says the project is backed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Other likely candidates are a 4-nation South American bid and a Saudi Arabia-led project involving Egypt. Indonesia's President Joko Widodo says locked gates had contributed to the crush at the soccer stadium that left 131 dead and over 400 injured when police fired tear gas and set off panicked run for the exits. Widodo said the statement after touring the stadium in East Java's Malang City for a first-hand look at the scene of one of the world's deadliest disasters at a sporting event. He also visited the victims at the hospital and pledged a thorough investigation into what had transpired on Saturday night. Police are insisting that the gates were open but were too narrow and could only accommodate 2 people at a time when hundreds were trying to escape. And we have reached the end of your sports update for 1 p.m. I'm Chad Asleo for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.